There is a huge misconception amongst all agencies, creators, and chatters in the OnlyFans space that you have to communicate with your customers in a way that is relationship building. But what they believe that relationship building means is being nice, responding every 30 seconds, and essentially being the perfect person to talk to. But what you've got to consider immediately from that is reflect on your own life and your own interactions. Has the most exciting and thrilling sexual relationships that you've ever had been from those that you've had the most plain, simple, straightforward, nice and polite interactions with? Or is it the more emotionally stimulating ones that capture your attention? Now, all of society agrees that the nice guy finishes last. And if we're truthful, the toxic ex often finishes first. And that should tell you a little bit about how to construct the chats on OnlyFans, because we have to think about how we can emotionally stimulate the customer. We all know that if we focus on sexually stimulating the customer, it's going to be an in and out job. You're going to get $20, $30, $40, $50, and that's going to be it. Whereas if we see an emotional stimulation, we could look at lots and lots of accumulative PPV purchases every single day, one after the other for a very long period of time. And when it comes to emotionally stimulating these guys, we have to remember that near enough every creator is offering the same super polite, super pretending they're interested conversation that ultimately the guys know isn't true. But if we had a creator that was a little bit difficult to maybe understand, was sometimes a bit back and forth with emotion, would sometimes respond, other times not, sometimes argue, sometimes be nice, it's a little bit more emotionally stimulating, and it creates a bit of a challenge for them to try and understand what's going on, and ultimately it keeps you at the forefront of their focus versus the same bullshit pretending to be nice that floods the DMs and that they don't even open. I guarantee you that if you presented the customer with the opportunity of 30 messages, 29 of which were being super, super nice, one of which was being a little difficult, a little hard to understand, but somewhat still emotionally stimulating in a way that excites them, I guarantee you that will be the one that they open, the one that they respond to first, and the one that ultimately they purchase a PPV from. Now, TDM is the most successful chatting service in the space, which means ultimately who better to offer a perspective than an agency that speaks to probably the most customers that any single entity would. We have spoken to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of customers and have gathered data on what works and what doesn't, and ultimately have delivered this pitch based on actual trial and error. And one of the biggest problems that we see with every single creator and agency that wants to use a service is an immediate focus from day one on response times. They judge the value of a chatter by response times, when ultimately you could hire a few virtual assistants and they could nail response times. But there's a reason why the chatting ratios aren't fantastic, and there's a reason why the overall spend and renews aren't where you want them. Emotionally stimulating a customer is a long process, and it takes time, and it takes well calculated, well thought through, carefully worded, emotionally intelligent strategy that only the best could offer. So hyper focusing on a micro detail like how fast you return a response, when ultimately they don't care because they're going to read it anyway, and how well you respond and in what direction that conversation is going determines whether they're going to come back and buy a PPV or not. Plus, if we apply any sort of logic, when is this creator going to sleep if you have 24/7 instant responses? It's just going to elude a level of suspicion that ultimately will defeat your objective in terms of gaining this guy's trust. There needs to be a degree of reality in the way that you run the account. A long response time while maybe the creator is getting ready or socializing or seeing family or doing anything is realistic, and in many ways a better strategy than getting back to them instantly, because there's only so many times that you can sell to this customer. Not every message every minute can be a PPV. So why waste time jeopardizing the authenticity when ultimately you can just send a few carefully worded, well-structured messages throughout the day that are extremely effective in the way that they work. Efficiency is a big part of OnlyFans management chatting. We notoriously have the best chatters, and our chatters are trained to respond in a fashion of priority with where that customer is in his daily cycle. If you have a customer that you run a 24-hour clock with, there is going to be a vast proportion of that day where response times can be high and attention and focus can be low, but you need to keep some sort of relationship there in order to be able to then really hone in on the hour or the half an hour where this guy is locked in with you. He might be sexting with you, he might be unlocking content, he might be doing anything, but there is a time frame, likely when he is spending, where you need a hyper focus of fast response times, carefully worded, well articulated, thought through messages that have a direction from one to the next. So your day as chatters or an agency or a creator or whoever you are should be set up to orchestrate that versus just fast response times all day, every day, alarm clocks, because that isn't efficiency. That isn't customer priority. That isn't KYC. One of the best ways to evaluate whether or not your chatters are operating at that standard is an assessment in your mind of how often do I see big purchases? Because that's a demonstration of trust from the customer. A lot of people will unlock a $20 purchase for all sorts of different reasons, be it they're just having a moment to themselves, be it curiosity, be it just something to have a look at because they're bored. Very few of those individuals will go on and spend $200 back to back. But if you see $200 purchases flowing one from the other, you can kind of tell this guy trusts whoever he's speaking to and feels somewhat invested in the process, likely both sexually and emotionally. So that is probably the single biggest indicator as to whether the chat strategy that you have aligns with the message we're trying to put out. Because if I reflect on our chats and I log on to any account that we have here within the agency, I guarantee you that within the last 24 hours, there is an accumulative $200 purchases that have racked up on that account from any one customer, which is an indication to me that, okay, our chatters here have got hold of somebody and that somebody is emotionally invested in the conversation and the chatter is doing their job very well. One other interesting way to evaluate whether or not your chat strategy aligns with what we see to be optimal is renew or rebill. If we have a chat strategy that offers the emotional stimulation I refer to, these guys will probably keep renew on, and therefore you can expect the renew percentage to be up when you're chatting versus any previous chatter that was on the account. Whereas actually if you're not necessarily stimulating this customer in the way that is offering you the most optimal longevity, then you'll probably notice your renew is down. So with that said, the premise here, try and keep an open mind to how chat strategy really needs to look for you as an agency or a creator, because it's so easy to get scooped into the whirlwind of response times, mass message PPV, script, and sort of following what is trendy. But actually use your own mind to evaluate in your own life, where was I the most invested in any one particular person? It's when things are up and down and all over the place and it's a bit crazy and I'm trying to make sense of it. That's what occupies your attention. Use the same knowledge that you've developed in your own life into the way that you communicate with others via this platform. It is the same interactions in a different format, so don't be distracted by trendy trigger words and shiny objects like response times.